Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and a very warm welcome to Tuesday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Smash the like button if you love me, subscribe if you're new, please have your say. There was never ever a superhero trend. There was only a Marvel cinematic trend I can only compare it to and equate it to Beatlemania. And just like Beatlemania, the Marvel Cinematic Universe trend ended because of huge political statements from Marvel Studios' parent company, Disney. Beatlemania ended because of John Lennon's political statements, public statements. And when you get political, you're always going to upset people with opposing political views. So if you're trying to sell stuff to people, if you're popular, you have to button your political opinions because you're not going to change anyone's mind. What's the point? But this is where we are now. What does the Marvel Cinematic Universe trend have to do with DC? Because my point is, DC were never part of the superhero trend. DC were a mockery from day one. And I'm not talking about prior to the DCEU. I'm talking about during the DCEU. Basically, the DCEU became a meme. People were making fun of the DCEU because when you stood it next to the very popular Marvel Cinematic Universe, it just didn't equate, it didn't relate to enough people, and there's many, many reasons to that. Of course, Warner Brothers have been the poison to DC's vein, and it's time for Warner Brothers to sell DC. I and many fans have given Warner Brothers chance after chance to make DC successful, to give us the DC movies consistently we want. Yes, of course, Tim Burton's Batman movies are awesome. Of course, Christopher Nolan's Batman movies are awesome. Of course, Dick Donner's Superman movie is awesome, right? Of course, I love Zack Snyder's Snyderverse and all of that, but away from that, it's been an absolute embarrassment, everyone. An embarrassment, time after time, time after time. When James Gunn was first announced to be the co-CEO of DC Studios, I was kind of excited because at that time, we were falsely led to believe that Henry Cavill would return as Superman in maybe a Superman versus Black Adam movie or at least a Man of Steel sequel. It was very, very exciting. Now, when James Gunn first announced that he wasn't going to use Henry Cavill as Superman anymore, I was kind of disappointed, but I felt maybe this is the right thing. Maybe it's time to move on. The more I thought about this decision in the months ahead, I've become more angrier and more frustrated because the more I think about it, the more wrong it is. And for me, removing Henry Cavill as Superman, this is where I am now, is the last straw. They've had 5 back-to-back flops in the DCEU, and I don't know about you, but I have so much mistrust on James Gunn, and I just think it's time that somebody else owns DC. I was thinking about this when I woke up this morning as I was laying in bed. I was thinking about the whole Sell Snyderverse to Netflix campaign. Now, I think that would really work for Snyderverse, but I don't think I want DC being owned by Netflix. I think, look, when I look at the success story of Universal, and Universal literally did exactly what Iger and Disney did back in their peak, where basically they started acquiring big companies and big partners. Let's look at this. The buyout of Illumination Studios is very similar to the buyout of Disney Pixar, or Pixar as it was, an independent studio that had a partnership with Disney in the early inception of that studio. Now, Illuminations are now the new kid on the block. Well, they've been around for such a long time. You have that partnership. But the big moment where Universal truly trounced Disney was when Disney were trying to buy Fox, but they also wanted Sky Television. But Universal told them if they didn't allow them to buy Sky, and this is what gangsters Universal are, they wouldn't stop taking it through the courts and bidding for Sky, so they'd never complete the 20th Century Fox deal. That's the moment Universal became the biggest studio in Hollywood. Universal and Paramount are now the two biggest studios in Hollywood. I remember the days of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the early days of Snyderverse. We used to talk about Disney and Warner Brothers being the two biggest studios in the world. And at that time, Disney were the biggest studio in the world. If you look at what Iger did with Disney, it was amazing. They were a silly little studio that made family-friendly cartoons and movies, and they became the biggest studio in the world. It's insane. But they were always going to destroy themselves. When was the Marvel Cinematic Universe truly destroyed, destabilized? The day that Brie Larson held a press conference denouncing straight white males in their 30s, which is pretty much the Marvel Cinematic Universe or universe's audience, or a big portion of it anyway. So don't think that people in Hollywood are actually clever people. They're the dumbest people in the world, and now they are. They never used to be. When it was run by the patriarchy, there was really smart people running this industry, but not anymore. So what I really want for DC is for it to be owned by Universal. Now, there's been loads of rumours of Universal wanting to buy Warner Brothers when they're legally allowed to make a bid, which they won't be allowed to do till next year. I'm not too sure about them buying Warner Brothers, but I would like them to try and buy DC. Of course, they can bid for DC anytime they want. Now, where is Zaslav right now? Well, Zaslav is in the middle of creating these plans for DC. He's put James Gunn and Safran in place. So my guesstimations would be that no one is going to be able to buy Warner Brothers or DC at this point unless James Gunn's and Peter Safran's DC Interconnected Universe fails from the first attempt, which would be Superman Legacy. So I'm guessing we're going to have to wait and see, although it depends how desperate Zaslav and Discovery are for money as well. There's a lot of pressure on that company, and it's not going to I don't think Warner Brothers are going to have a good year this year. I expect Barbie to flop. I may be surprised, even though those posters are trending, all those different Barbie posters. The trailer looked shit. Don't say I didn't warn you. I don't see where Warner Brothers get a big hit this year. They're really looking to make a lot of money from the Flash movie. But apart from that, I don't see where the big money's coming from. Although isn't Dune 2 released later this year, so you would expect that movie to hit big as well. But they're not a successful company. They haven't made good money consistently for a long time. And it is about making money consistently on content. It's no good having one hit or two hits every 3 or 4 years. You've got to be consistent with your content, and they haven't been consistent with their content. I look at the decisions that David Zaslav has made. I only really approve of one decision, and it was the acquisition of getting M. Night Shyamalan on an exclusive contract for WB. Because like Zack Snyder, M. Night Shyamalan has a cult fandom. He has a cult audience, and that's a big deal for any studio. Despite the bad reviews his movies get, and this kind of thing where, he hasn't made a good movie in 15 years, his fans love his movies, and his movies make solid bank. Nothing tremendous, but again, as I say, it's all about consistent box office. As I say, Warner Brothers have had their chance at running DC. Warner Brothers have owned DC maybe for 50 years or something. It's been a very, very long time. And it's been the same mistakes time after time. They could have created their own interconnected DC universe when they launched Batman Begins in 2005. They could have made Superman Returns part of that universe, and the Green Lantern movie could have also been part of that universe, or the Green Lantern movie could have started a brand new interconnected universe, but they got the Green Lantern movie wrong. In comes the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and basically they're just laughing at DC, right? And then DC make bad decision after bad decision. As much as I love the Snyderverse, you know, once you bring in Snyder and Nolan, as we discussed yesterday, you're not going to be attracting the general audience. They needed to make different decisions, and they didn't make the right decisions. Then they just booted Snyder out, and you know, we've been here so many times. We know the issues, we know the problems. So I'm done with WB owning DC. And if I were you, the fans, I would start pushing for Universal to buy DC. Like the Snyder fans are pushing Netflix to buy Snyderverse. It's the same thing at the end of the day. I think this is what we should be doing. We've seen how great Universal's partnership with Illuminations is. We're seeing the crazy box office come in for the Super Mario Brothers movie. So if they can do it there, why can't they make DC successful? I never ever wanted Disney to own DC, and I certainly don't want Disney to own DC now. But I would absolutely love to see Universal own DC. I think that may be our last hope, our only hope of getting consistent DC. Yes, I expect Joker 2 to be great. I expect the Batman 2 to be great. I expect the Penguin to be great. But that's not good enough. We need competent people to own the DC IP. And right now, the DC IP isn't owned by competent people. And this is where we are now. So at the end of the day, if we want DC to move forward, if we want to see great comic book accurate movies, look how accurate to the game the Mario movie is. And I mean, think about it. How do you even adapt a Mario movie? Anyone who's played a Super Mario Brothers game before knows that there's not a movie in those games, but these people found a really clever way of making a simplistic animated Mario movie for kids and for families, and it's worked. So that's where their genius is. They didn't take any risks. They didn't try and make big statements in the movie. It's just a sweet, entertaining, enjoyable movie about two characters whose games we've been playing since 1985. So this is their genius. So if they can do it there, why can't they do it here? Of course, you know, Nintendo really policed the situation, and I mean, there'll be no one policing the DC situation, but you just need the right people or the right person running DC, which has never happened. DC has never had the right leader, and that is the issue. You need competent people or a competent person with the right ideas. I don't know at this moment in time who that is, but Universal are more qualified than you or me to make those decisions. I mean, surely they're considering it. If the rumor is, of course, if they do buy Warner Brothers next year, they will also own DC. So if the rumors are true that they do want to acquire Warner Brothers, which it was something I was originally against, but now I'm all for. Warner Brothers is finished as an independent studio on its own. It's clear now. The AT&T acquisition, the AT&T and Discovery merger prove that they're done. It's finished. They're just an incompetent company. No matter who owns them, they're an incompetent company. AT&T still own the majority of shares of Warner Brothers, right? With Discovery owning around 28 to 30%, maybe 35%. So you know, this Discovery merger has been in place for nearly 12 months. And really, what changes have we seen? We've seen an inception of a DC Studios that hasn't really done very much. Yes, they've made some big announcements about a slate. Will it ever happen? I don't know. Will Universal own WB even before the release of Superman Legacy? And if Universal do own DC and WB, or just DC, what does that mean? Does that mean that the James Gunn plan goes ahead, or do they just dump James Gunn as a brand and as the head of the brand as well? Because that's the reality here, that this time next year, WB could be owned by Universal. In turn, they will own DC. And I will throw my fists in the air and I'll be very happy. As you know, if you're a consistent viewer, this is not what I wanted a few months ago. But now I've made the decision, especially with the success of Mario, that Universal is the right place for DC to be for its prosperous, vibrant future. Because there's never going to be a prosperous, vibrant future. Because the people at WB Pictures have got a stranglehold on DC. The same people who put together Justice League. The same people who were going to, you know, axe Cavill and Affleck and create a new timeline within the Flash movie are still running DC right now. You may not think this is the case. You may think I'm going out there in an X-Files conspiracy theory. But my friends, I'm in tune with the industry and I know this to be a fact. It's as simple as that. And the only way we can break their monopoly on our beloved DC is if a competent company like Comcast and Universal own DC. And I believe this time next year, or a little bit later than that, we could be under finally a vibrant new ownership. And of course, you know, it will be another set of owners, but obviously WB would just be swallowed up. It would be like the 20th Century Fox acquisition by Disney. There literally is no 20th Century Fox anymore. Not really. So at the end of the day, I think this is the best thing for DC and for WB. And as I say, I've changed my mind because I just don't see where we go from here. We thought that when Zaslav came in and removed Sarnoff and Emmerich, even though Emmerich really is still there, and that is the big problem. And it looks like Emmerich is getting his own way with DC. Because I repeat, nothing is actually changing at DC. The Flash movie changes the timeline, exactly what Hamada was going to do. What is the fucking difference here, right? What is the change here? What is the difference? No, there's no difference. It's the same plan. You need to understand this. So the best way, if you want DC to thrive, if you want a vibrant, exciting future for DC like Nintendo fans have and Mario fans have, the DC must be owned by Universal. And I wouldn't be talking about this if I didn't hear some whispers that this could become a reality. I absolutely think this is the best thing for DC right now. I don't know what the other answer is. I just don't believe that Zaslav, Gunn and Safran can bring success to DC within the terms of DC Studios and DC Universe. But I certainly think that people at Comcast Universal can certainly bring the success that DC fans have been hungry for and desperate for all these years. It's time for DC to stop being a meme, to stop being mocked. We need to be run by competent people. So that's what I'm going to start doing via my social media platforms, pushing for Universal to buy WB and to own DC. In other news, Grant Gustin, who's played The Flash for 9 seasons on the CW The Flash show, the best live-action version of this character, claims he's not in the Flash movie. He claims he's not lying, he's not been told to keep the secret. He says he's definitely not in the movie. I'd love to know your thoughts about this. Are you upset that Grant Gustin is claiming that he's not in the Flash movie? Do you think he's lying? What do you think is going on? Well, for me, right, there's only one way Grant Gustin isn't in this movie, and that's if he's been cut from this movie. That's all I'm going to say. You know my knowledge of the Flash movie. I'm not going to go deeper than that. But if he's not in this movie, he's been cut from this movie. And that's a very, very interesting situation. Why would you cut Grant Gustin from this movie? It's insane to think that you won't see the best version of live action Flash cameo in this movie. But you know what's even worse than fucking that? Think about this, right? They had this excellent Ezra Miller, crossover on Crisis on Infinite Earths on the Arrowverse crossover, right? So we were like saying, wow, this is just the beginning. They're going to meet again in the Flash movie. And we read so many rumors about that so many times. As I say, I have inner knowledge about this situation. So if he actually isn't in this movie, this is what I've been talking about all show for the past 20 minutes. WB have had their chance with DC, and they keep on making shitty decisions like this. Why wouldn't you want Grant Gustin in a Flash movie, at least as a cameo? It's disgusting. This guy has serviced this character beautifully for nearly a decade, and you're not going to cameo him. You know, what makes more sense? Michael Keaton's Batman in this film, which is a great selling point. We understand and I love him. But what makes more sense? Because if Grant Gustin isn't in this movie, does this mean that John Wesley Shipp, the original first live-action Flash actor, right, is not cameoing in this movie either? I don't know anything about John Wesley Shipp, by the way. But if he's not cameoing in this movie, that's disgusting. That's even more disgusting than Grant not being in the movie or being cut from the movie. So these people are fucking clueless. So we will wait and see if Grant Gustin is making this up, if he's doing, the kind of BS we saw from Spider-Man No Way Home where they were denying they were in the movie. We'll have to wait and see. But if Grant Gustin has been cut from this movie, if John Wesley Shipp is not in this movie, in a Flash movie, if they don't even cameo for a few seconds, it's absolutely disgusting if you ask me. Now I want to talk about Superman and Lois. Now there's been many times where I've waved the Superman and Lois flag, but something happened in last week's episode that really, really triggered me. Now there's two really brilliant scenes in two separate Superman movies. So there's a bar scene in Man of Steel where Clark Kent stops a toxic male from fondling a barmaid's backside. And there's also a bit in a cafe in Superman 2 where Superman gets beaten up, but he comes back at the end of the movie, gets his revenge by having a playful kind of, revenge push on the guy. He puts him on a tray of food, sits on it, pushes him on the flipper machine. You remember it, right? Well, in Superman and Lois, they had their own moment in a bar or cafe. So basically, to cut a long story short, something happened. Some thug had been bullying Lois and the kids or whatever, right? So Clark walks in. The guy tries to push him, and then he grabs him and he says, if you ever threaten my family again, I will come for you. Or I'm paraphrasing here. But honestly, if you've actually seen this scene, it's more like Grant Mitchell in EastEnders, if you've ever watched EastEnders, than Clark Kent. The Snyderverse has been accused of being too dark and portraying Superman as too dark. But Snyder never portrayed Clark this dark. It was so bad. This was not Clark Kent. Basically, you wouldn't even get this in Smallville unless Clark was on Red K, and that's how he became evil and used to lose his inhibitions when he used to take Red K. This is not Clark Kent. This was just ridiculous. And there doesn't seem to be any outside explanation for it. It's so out of character for Clark. And people are going to say, well, if people threatened your family, yeah, right, I understand. But we're talking within a story where we've got a meek and mild character. I would expect Clark to have a word in this guy's shell light. I understand that, but this was way too dark. And this wasn't Clark Kent. This isn't the Clark Kent we know and love, and it really felt like Batman rather than Superman, if you ask me. And they've always got these taglines, anti-Superman taglines, on the promotional material for Superman and Lois. It's about family. It's about love. Will their love prosper? Clark doesn't need to be Superman to beat the bad guys. That's so Greg Berlanti, because Greg Berlanti is really anti-Superman. Let's look at the evidence. He retired Tom Welling's Superman in Crisis on Infinite Earths, a disgusting moment. It's not Smallville canon as far as I'm concerned. He then had Superman take Lois from Arrowverse to Kandor to have their baby, or babies, right, or whatever. And now they've got Clark Kent acting like the fucking enforcer, acting like Dirty Harry. I think this is one of the worst things and moments I've ever seen in Superman live action. You know my love for Superman. But and people complain to this day that Clark crushed this toxic male's truck, the guy who was, fondling the woman's backside. Clark did the right thing. Clark tried to stop him politely. He didn't become thuggish like Clark in Superman and Lois. He did it politely. He said, I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you continue. The guy pushes him, pours a glass of beer, a pint of beer all over his head, while the other toxic males start laughing. So Superman Clark gets his revenge in a really light kind of way by destroying his truck. Tom Welling's Clark Kent also did this in the Smallville pilot to Whitney's truck, if you remember. And in Superman 2, I think the way they dealt with that scene was a lot lighter and better, and you can have some fun with it and laugh with it. But what I saw in Superman and Lois was way too dark and way out of character for Clark Kent, if you ask me. It's just my opinion. You can disagree. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of that situation. Did you enjoy the scene? Did you think it's good? And which is your favourite cafe or bar moment in Superman live action history? The one in Superman 2, the one in Man of Steel, or the one in Superman and Lois? I must admit, I do like the one in Man of Steel and Superman 2 equally. Both handled very well, because Clark still is still faithful to who Superman and Clark is in those two sequences. But in Superman and Lois, that is not Clark Kent. That's not peak Clark Kent. That's a mobster. That's the enforcer. That's Dirty Harry. That's Grant Mitchell from EastEnders. I'm sorry, that is not Clark Kent. That was more fucking Jack Bauer from 24, another big hero of mine. But yeah, I was shocked by this scene, I must admit. I didn't like it. I didn't appreciate it. You get a lot of Superman and Lois Shields and stans posting a lot of scenes, but you get a lot of stans doing this on Twitter anyway. They post the perfect shots. They post this and that, and they think they're shutting people down by showing certain things. And sometimes they end up exposing the thing that they love. And I think, and as I say, I really like Superman and Lois. I think Todd Helbing's done a really good job. And as a whole, it works for a certain audience. It's not universally loved, but it's got, a good audience there. And hopefully it continues for another couple of years. Tyler Hoechlin is a really good Superman. There's no question about that. But the point being, this scene went way too dark, and it went way darker than anything Zack Snyder ever did. Isn't it interesting? When Zack does something, it's wrong, it's too dark, but when anyone else does something, no one talks about it. And that's the problem. And that's part of the hypocrisy that drove Snyder out of DC. And it's simply not fair, because we were robbed of Justice League 2. We were robbed of Justice League 3. We were robbed of Ben Affleck's The Batman movie as well. And that, my friends, isn't fair because the Snyderverse was building up to something really special. This has been Tuesday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection, if I can get my words out. And I will see you again in the next video. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.